Welcome to Lesson 12 in Through the New Testament in Ancient Greek for Absolute Beginners. My name is Helena Stay, and I'm your guide as we read through the New Testament in its original, beautiful language, the language of ancient Greece, which coincidentally was called Helena Stay. Because each lesson will build on previous lessons, be sure to start with Lesson 1. In this lesson, we will read the first 4 verses of Matthew 6, which is a continuation of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. These verses include his instruction about giving. And in so doing, we're going to have a few topics. This is why we're only reading 4 verses, because we have a lot to cover. We're going to do a really brief review of the imperative mood, which is commands. We're going to do a very brief introduction to infinitives. It's another mood of verbs. And then we're going to do an introduction to what we call moods, tenses, and voices of verbs. And then we're going to do a really brief introduction to the verb forms of ποίεω, which means I do. And finally, I'm going to give you instructions for flashcards that I've made that cover all of the words that we've learned amazingly in Matthew chapters 1 through 5. All right, let's get going. Pros έχετε de ten dikaiasunein humon. Me poiein emprosthen ton anthropon prosta theathenai autois. Ede mege misthan uk έχετε para to patri humon to en tois uranois. Hatan un poies eleemasunein me salpises, emprosthen su, hosper hoi hypocritai poiusin en tais synagogais, kai en tais rumais, hapos doxasthosin hupa ton anthropon, amen legohumin, apekusin ton misthan auton. All right, the first thing I want to cover in these verses is a really quick review of our imperative mood. The imperative mood is just a fancy way of saying commands. So it's when you ask someone to do something, or when you wish that something would happen. In English, you would say, let it rain, for my crops are dying. Let it rain. So it's basically a wish or a command. In this case, in Bible Hub, you can tell by the letter M, the second letter after the V dash, that is what imperative verbs are indicated with. So look for that M there. And then there's also, as you recall, 2 different tenses for the imperative. All right, so I'll just write it down here. We have our imperative mood, somebody who's in the mood to give a command. And then you have either a present tense or an aorist tense. And we'll go into more detail in the future of why you would use present versus aorist, or why sometimes there's a difference. Sometimes we can't tell, but often there's a reason. And then those are the tenses. We'll go over this a few times so everybody can understand. This is called the mood. And then the second part, the last part, this A, is called your voice. So the voice is going to be one of 3 things. It's an active voice, like I leave. I leave my girlfriend, or I leave my boyfriend. Or it's going to be passive. I was left by my girlfriend, or I was left by my boyfriend. And then in Greek, we also have a voice that's called middle, which actually corresponds a lot to, we might call them like reflexive verbs in other languages like Spanish or Italian or French. When you do something to yourself, so you could say, I wash my face, that would be middle because you're doing it to yourself. Whereas if you say, I wash the floor, that would be active because you're doing it to something else. You're the one that's being active. Or if you say, I am washed, like maybe by the nurse, who else would wash you? That would be passive, I am washed. So active is I wash, middle would be I wash myself, and passive would be I am washed by the nurse. All right, so this will all come to be more clear, but let me just put this here. As your tense is the first, your mood is the second, and your voice is the third, TMV. So V-TMV. And then you have your person, whether it's first, second, or third person, and your number. So person and number. So TMVPN. So V-TMV-PN. And of course, in English, we only have second person. We don't even know if it's plural or singular. Beware. You couldn't tell whether you're saying that to someone who's a single person or to a whole crowd of people. In English, beware is the same. But in Greek, the endings will change depending on whether you're giving the command to one person or to lots of people. And then also in Greek, there's third person commands. So you can actually say to someone that you're not directly talking to, you can command them to do something. So that's a very different thing about Greek. All right, so that's enough for now. I don't want to overwhelm you, but the more I talk about it, the more this will make sense to you. So just hang in there. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about in these verses is the infinitive mood. We just talked about the imperative mood, which was indicated by an M. Now we're going to talk about the infinitive mood, which is indicated by, you guessed it, an N. So this second position here, remember, is for our mood. That is going to be an infinitive when you see an N. And here's another one, N. That's the mood, and the N is imperative. Okay, again, with imperatives and infinitives, you can have present, and you can have what's called aorist for the tense. And then you can also have an active, a middle, or a passive voice. All right, so again, let me just give you guys this quick review. We have moods. Oh. Mood is either going to be imperative, I'll just put imp, infinitive, indicative, which we talked about is just pretty much everything when you're talking about reality. And then we have something called subjunctive, which we're going to talk about more in the future, but that's when you're talking about something that's not necessarily reality, but potentially hypothetical or in the future, and not absolutely certain. And then there's also something called participles. So these are the most important moods. And then for this A part, that is your tense. And so far we've talked about, and you can have different tenses for each mood. So within the moods you have tenses. We have present tense, and then we're going to learn about aorist. That's like past tense. And then there's another type of past tense, I'll just put it over here, which is called imperfect, like it's ongoing. It's not perfect, it hasn't completely finished. I'll talk about that in the future. And then another one, which you're familiar with, I'm sure, is the future tense. I will go, something that happens in the future. All right, and then there's a few others, but I just want to focus on present and aorist right now, because these are the differences here. This is present infinitive, to do, and then an aorist infinitive ends with a different ending. It's usually an AI. That's AI, and then ain is for present. The good thing about infinitives is that there's not a whole lot of forms in Greek, but you'll kind of notice that it's either EIN, epsilon, iota, nu, or alpha, iota. Those are the main endings for the infinitive. All right, now I just want to point out, we use an infinitive in English just by adding to. All right, so to do, to make, to love, to dance, to go. Those are all infinitives. And you use it almost like a noun, like I love to dance would be a noun. It's the act of dancing. Now, a passive, like we talked about wash, here this is passive. It's not to see, it's to be seen. To be seen. And for those of you that are interested, this is a past participle right here. So to be seen is how we form are passive infinitives in English. We add to be to the past participle. To be washed, to be loved. These are all infinitives, and infinitives are really, really helpful. Whenever you say I want, and then something that you would do, that would be using an infinitive. I want to do this. I want to see this. I want to be seen, so on and so forth. So again, we're going to go into this so many times you're going to get sick of it. But we have moods, and within those moods we have tenses, and then you can either have active, passive, and then middle is when you're doing something to yourself. We'll go into a lot of detail about middle, but just so you know all these little short kind of abbreviations in Bible Hub, I wanted to at least give you that overview. Okay, the next thing I want to point out in these two verses is the verb poiêo. I do. So this omega here, that indicates generally at the end of a verb, there's always going to be exceptions in Greek, but usually if you see an omega at the end, shows you how this omega means I do. So you actually don't even have to have ego, which is the word for I. In Greek, just having this omega here indicates that it's I do, and it's present, indicative, active, that pia. All right, so poiêo is what we call the lexical form. We're going to get into some detail about what that means in just a sec. But let me just point out 3 different uses of poiêo here. First of all, we have the infinitive that we just talked about, poiein. It's our present infinitive active, poiein, to do. And then down here, we have the same Strong's number, so we know it's all from the same lexical form, poiêo. This is you do, but it's an uncertain. So when, therefore, you do, kind of like an if statement. If you do, when you do, if ever you do, acts of charity. This is called subjunctive. That's why there's this S, present subjunctive, active, because you're the one that's doing it. They're not done to you. Second person singular is basically you singular. You know, here Jesus is talking to you, just a single person. And then over here we have another present, but this time it's indicative mood. Indicative means that you're in kind of reality. You're talking about something that you know to be true. So this is active. So the hypocrites are doing it. It's not done to them. So that's the A. Indicative, present. So indicative mood, present tense, active voice. Third person, plural. All right. Third person plural in English is they, or, you know, more than one person that is not you or the person you're talking to. Poiusin is the form. So this ending usin is to indicate they, whereas the o, ao, is to indicate I. That's first person singular. All right, so let's go ahead and read these next 2 verses. Sude poiuntas ele emasunein me gnoto he aristera su ti poie he dexia su. Hapos e su he eleia masune ento crypto kai hapater su ha blepon ento crypto apadose soy. All right, so let's first point out 2 more forms of poiêo. We have 4160, that's our Strong's number. I'm going to switch over and show you in Bible Hub how you can look this up and see all the different forms of poiêo. But first, let me just point out this is a present participle. So it's a participle in terms of mood. And that's when a verb is acting as an adjective. So, and then active, so it's you're still doing it. It's not being done to you. Genitive. All right, and this is a genitive absolute, so don't worry about what that means, but this is in the absolute genitive. It could be a nominative because it's you doing it, but this is a phrase that indicates timing. Masculine, singular. So genitive masculine, singular adjective. So it's describing you doing. In English, our participles generally end with ing, or past participles generally are things like washed or having gone would be a past participle form of an adjective that describes somebody. So present participle active, genitive masculine singular, poiuntas. And then over here we have another indicative present, Ποιεω is our first person singular, present indicative active verb. Here we have our third person singular. So he, she, or it, ποιέ. All right, so present indicative active third person singular, ποιέ. So now I'm going to switch over to Bible Hub, and I'm going to show you how you can look up all the different forms of ποιεω. All right, so here we are in BibleHub.com at Matthew 6, and we're going to click through and go to Strong's number 4160, which shows us ποιεω is what's called the lexical form, or the original word. What does that mean? The original word, ποιεω. Well, ποιεω is the simplest form. It's just the present indicative active first person singular of a verb. So that's just going to be what everything is indexed under in a lexicon. So when you go to a Greek lexicon, which is basically like a big dictionary of what Greek words mean in English, you're going to look it up under this form, ποιεω. Now in English, in our dictionaries, we usually use the infinitive. So if it's to go or if it's to see, you wouldn't look it up under went. Okay, went is a form of go, but that's not really, I mean, you could look it up because we don't have very many forms of the verbs, but this is the word that you would use in a dictionary. This was the word. You wouldn't look it up under seen. But in Greek, you want to look it up under the present tense indicative active form, first person singular. And that's what's called the lexical form, because you would look it up in a lexicon, the lexical form. So if you go to this 4160 in BibleHub.com and you see that it's ποιεω, you can scroll down and see all of the uses of every form of ποιεω. So it's going to look different. ποιέτε, ποιούσιν, ποιέν, ποιές, so forth. Ποιούσιν again, ποιούντας. So there's all the different forms of ποιεω and they're used, and you can actually then see down here. This actually cuts off after a while. You could list all 572 if you click through to 572. But here, you now see all the different forms that ποιεω can take, depending on the mood, the tense, and the voice. So we have, let me show you the ones we've already seen. We've seen ποιέσαι, we've seen ποιούσιν, and what about ποιέν? Ποιέν is right here. Ποιέν is our infinitive. Let's go ahead and click through. There are 26 occurrences of this form, ποιέν. That's a form of ποιεω, the present infinitive active. So beware of practicing. Trees cannot bring forth to produce good fruit. It is unlawful to do something on the Sabbath. To do good on the Sabbath, to make, to do, to execute, to do. So you can see all the different ways it's used as an infinitive, which is very helpful because you know now if it's an infinitive, how is that often translated, and it really will help you understand the use of the infinitive in Greek. And again, we can go to ποιεω. Is there ever any here, ποιεω? There's actually not going to be any ποιεω because it's what's called a contract verb, but I'll show you what that means in the future. But ποιεω, I do these things, I do these things, I keep the Passover, I do these things, I do these things, I do these things. So you can see ποιεω is the actual use of I do. ποιεω is the lexical form, just to show you that it's a contract verb. And then ποιέ we've seen, he or she or it does, makes her commit adultery, is doing, bears. So you can see a lot of the different translations of why they would use. All right, so we just looked in Bible Hub at 4160, and you can see all of the different forms of ποιεω, including the first person singular, which we found out is ποιό actually. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. All right, the last thing I want to go over today is how you can use Quizlet to really help you with your Greek. Now, this is not a requirement. You can still read through the New Testament in Greek along with me, but if you really want to get a lot out of it, I recommend that you download Quizlet on your smartphone or on your smart device, an iPad or similar. or you can actually do it in your browser, in anything it's a computer or device. So if you go to Quizlet.com. Now, when you're in the device, you'll see a screen like this. You can search using this little magnifying glass, and you can search for Helene Iste, all one word. You can also search for it with the space. You can also search for through the New Testament in ancient Greek. All of those things should turn up my class. And then in order to join the class, to become a member, you have to request to be a member. And don't worry, I'll turn that request around as soon as possible. And then you can start using the flashcards that I've developed specifically for the class. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how that works on my phone. All right, this is Helene Iste. I'm in my iPhone right now, so I can show you this app. It will look similar, slightly different, but similar types of functionality on the website. But I really like the app. So once you become a member, I'll just have to accept your request. You can come in here and make sure you're in sets. And you can find 6 different sets that I've put in. We have adverbs in Matthew 1 through 5. And by the way, these are probably the most common adverbs in the New Testament because they show up so frequently. We're going to see them in the first 5 chapters we've read. And then we have 36 conjunctions, prepositions, and particles that we've come across. Again, probably the most common in the New Testament. And then 157. Don't be scared by that because it's all of the various forms of the article. So that's ha, hey, ta, and to, taste, to, etc. And also the pronouns. So we've looked at personal pronouns. We've looked at a few relative pronouns. We've looked at a few indefinite pronouns, which are also the same as interrogative pronouns. So I have all of these. So whether we've seen them or not, I have them all in here. So this is all the articles and pronouns in the New Testament. And then we have adjectives, which are 50. Wow, 50 exactly. 50 adjectives that we've come across in Matthew 1 through 5. Again, some of them are very common. And then the common verb forms, ones that appear 20 or more times in the New Testament, I brought those out so you could recognize them more easily. And then finally, 181 nouns. Now, I might break this into the most common ones and then the less common ones. That might narrow it down so you can focus on the common ones. But for now, they're all in there together, 181. Now, it's really helpful to have flashcards. When you click on a flashcard set, you'll see the flashcards up here. You could study them up here, but I actually like to use their flashcard functionality, which is right here. And going to options, I start with the Greek. Now, once you get more capable, you can switch over and start with us showing the English so you can remember the Greek. But starting with the Greek and going to English is much easier. All right, so there's going to be 34. So at the top, you see 1 out of 34. And we start with monon, monon. So if you aren't sure, just check it. You click on it. And, merely. It's kind of like only or merely. So you're like, okay. And then you swipe to the left. Notice how it says study again at the top. That indicates that you're going to study that again. You don't quite remember. Ook, and ook. Those are the words for no, right? And before a verb, it's going to mean not, like I am not going. So it's negating a verb. And that's only used for indicative mood, by the way. May is used for non-indicative, like infinitives and participles and subjunctive and imperatives. So ook before a soft breathing mark, vowel, and before a rough breathing mark, vowel, if it follows that word. So I know that one. So I'm going to go ahead and say got it. And then akathen. Don't remember. From there. Oh, that's right. So you go ahead and study again. Svadra. Oh, that's right. The exceedingly great joy of the Magi. I remember that. Exceedingly great. All right. You go to the right. And then epan. Don't remember. Oh, after or when. Okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and go through these and just assume I know one. I don't know one. I know one. I don't know one. I don't. So you go through all of them until you get through all 34. And then it says, you've got this, continue studying. So if you click continue studying, you go back to just the ones you didn't know. Now notice there's only 18. So hopos. Oh, so that, okay. Apiso. Okay, so if you narrow them down more, then by the time you get to the end, it will allow you to continue studying just those 5 that you didn't know. Kakos, badly, sick, wrongly, I knew that, prin, and so forth. So once you understand them all, then you get a congratulations, and you can reset and go back to all 34. But doing this a little bit each day is really going to help you understand your adverbs. And here's our conjunctions. Flashcards, starting with the Greek. You can start with English later when you get better. But on, indicates a future event. It's a particle. Okay, that's cool. Pros, to, followed by the accusative. Very nice to know that. Oh, that's right. Pros, towards something like in, ace, is also followed by the accusative. All right. Nigh here is yes. Oh, I knew that one. A, or. Huper is above or over, followed by genitive or accusative. All right, so you just keep going through those, and then it'll remember the next time you go in there where you left off, or you could go here and click Restart Flashcards. All right, and then one thing I want to point out is with my verb forms. The verb forms are really difficult, so this is going to take a long time. I just want you to be familiar with maybe pronouncing them. Elthone, having come. Oh, that's a verb, V. APA is aorist, participle, active, nominative, masculine, singular. And then I also put in 50x. That appears 50 times in the New Testament. Whoa, having come. 50 times. I'm going to try to remember that. Having come. Elthone. All right. Or actually, you know what? If I made a mistake, I wanted to go there, I can just click the back, the arrow on the lower left corner. Erxato. He began. Verb, aorist, indicative, middle, third person singular, 41 times. Erxato. All right, so if this is helpful to you, great. If it's not, don't worry about it. But I like this because you can see how often it's used in the whole New Testament. He, she, or it went out. Op eilthen. That might be helpful to know. Poiesai. Oh, that means to make. That's aorist, infinitive, active, 47 times. Ephe, he says. Ephe. Apen, he said. So poiete, you make, you do. So hopefully this is helpful to you. If you don't want to do the verb forms, no problem. That's a lot of strange forms to remember. And pretty soon we'll be learning how to form them ourselves. But I thought it would be helpful for you to recognize some. And the nouns, there are 181. So again, I might break this down into the most common ones. Like, for example, winnowing fork, you're not going to really need to know that. Patuon. I think it's only 1 or 2 times in the entire New Testament. But if you want to, baptistes, the baptizer, the Baptist. Gehenna, that is hell. Or Gehenna is a part of location in Israel where they threw the trash. Basanos. Oh, pains and torments. That's one's not as common. So if you want to keep all 181, great. I probably will go ahead and give you one that is just the more common nouns, just like I did with verb forms. All right, and then the one I wanted to point out to you about the articles and pronouns, this has a lot of different forms, 157. But you'll notice that they're super common in the New Testament. You're going to see these words all the time. So it's probably good to have all of these, even though we probably haven't seen all of these in the first 5 chapters of Matthew. But a lot of these are very common. So for example, soy is to or for you. Auton is him, used as an object. This is ho. That is your relative pronoun, meaning to whom, for whom, masculine and neuter, singular. So you can kind of come in here and just get an idea of a lot of the most common ones. Tain is the definite article for thee when you're talking about feminine, singular, object. So it would be a direct object. So I have this form, article, accusative, feminine, singular. So that should help you. And you're going to not know these right away, of course, but over time you'll get much better. And just doing a few minutes a day is really worth it. So set a reminder and say, oh, for the next 5 minutes, I'm going to look at my flashcards for Greek. And if you get frustrated, don't worry. Don't worry. You're not going to remember it right away. You're going to remember it eventually. So just know each day you might get a little better. It might not be obvious, but a year from now, you're going to know a lot more. All right, so that's my little overview. I hope to see you on Quizlet. And give me some feedback. I think you can communicate with your teacher easily through Quizlet. So please let me know how you're doing. All right, well, that concludes our lesson 12. I am very grateful for your joining us, and I encourage you to stick with it. It's going to get easier the more we go over all of these different concepts. So we look forward to seeing you next time.